The sun was falling slowly behind the tall mountains of the colony world. Long shadows stretched over the fields, and the wind carried strange whispers through the trees. Most children were already inside their homes, safe behind steel doors. But one child, a 6-year-old girl named Alara, wandered further than she was supposed to. Alara was not like other children. Where they were cautious, she was curious. Where they feared the dark woods beyond the colony wall, she felt drawn to them. Many warnings had been given to her. Don't go near the forest. Don't leave the fences. There are things out there we cannot control. But to a child, warnings were only stories. Stories that made the unknown feel even more exciting. Her small boots crunched on dry leaves as she slipped past a half-broken gate. The air was cooler here, filled with the scent of wet moss and hidden life. The colony lights behind her faded until they were only tiny sparks in the distance. Before her, the forest waited, dark and alive. For a moment she felt brave. But then she heard it, a sound unlike any she had heard before. It was not the growl of a wolf beast. It was not the hiss of a crawler. It was something deeper, stranger. A low growl, mixed with a weak cry, as if something dangerous was also in pain. Alara froze. Her heart beat faster. She remembered the old tales. About monsters with teeth longer than swords, about shadows with wings that covered the moon. Her small hands shook. Should she run back? But curiosity pushed her forward. She stepped carefully, following the sound through twisted roots and glowing plants. The cries grew louder. They were not only fierce, they were sad. Something was suffering in the darkness. And Alara, in her little heart, felt the need to help. The trees parted into a clearing where moonlight fell like silver rain. At the center, lying on the ground, was a creature she had never seen before. It was small, yet not small at all. Its body was covered in dark, shining scales that glimmered like armor. Its wings were folded, torn at the edges. Its claws dug weakly into the dirt. Two eyes, glowing faintly like embers, lifted toward her. A dragon hatchling. Alara gasped. Dragons were supposed to be terrible. Everyone said they were the most awful, terrifying beasts in the galaxy. Hunters chased them across the stars. Colonies feared their fire, and soldiers told horror stories of villages burned to ash. A dragon was never a friend. A dragon was never safe. And yet, this one looked helpless. Its cry was not the cry of a killer. It was the cry of a child, lost and alone. Alara's fear should have made her run. Her parents would have screamed if they knew she was standing so close. The colony soldiers would have fired their weapons without hesitation. But she was only 6. She did not see a monster. She saw a hurt baby. Her lips curved into a small smile. She tilted her head and whispered one single word. Cute. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The hatchling stopped growling. Its glowing eyes blinked slowly, as if the word had broken through its pain. Tilted its head too, almost copying her. The sharp claws did not strike. The teeth did not snap. Instead, it let out a softer sound. A confused little rumble, almost like a question. Alara took a tiny step closer. Her heart raced, but not from fear anymore. She knelt in the grass, her small hands resting on her knees. Don't be scared, she whispered, as if she could comfort the beast. The hatchling shifted. Its wings twitched. The ground trembled under its movements, yet it did not attack. Its nose lowered, sniffing at the air around her, as if trying to understand why this fragile human child was not running away. To Alara, its eyes no longer looked terrifying. They looked lonely. Minutes passed, but to her it felt like forever. The world outside the clearing no longer existed. There was only her and the dragon hatchling. Far behind, a howl echoed through the woods. Other beasts roamed the night, drawn to weakness and blood. The hatchling growled again, this time stronger, its scales bristling. It wanted to defend itself even in its injured state. Alara stood up straighter, suddenly afraid. Not of the dragon, but of what else was out there. Without thinking, she moved closer to the hatchling, almost as if her tiny body could protect it. You're not scary, she whispered, almost stubbornly. You're mine. The words were simple, childish, but powerful. The bond had begun. The hatchling's growl softened. Its head lowered to the ground, eyes watching her every move. It did not trust fully yet, but something inside it seemed to shift. A seed of connection, planted in the most unlikely place. A human child's innocent heart. Elara sat beside it, ignoring the cold, ignoring the danger. Her fingers reached out, trembling, and touched the edge of one torn wing. The scales felt rough and warm. The hatchling flinched, but did not strike. Instead, it released a low sound. Not anger, but something closer to a sigh. Elara giggled softly. To her, it truly was cute. In the colony, people would never believe this moment. They would call her foolish. They would call the creature dangerous. But here, in the silver clearing, under the watch of the stars, the truth was clear. The terrifying dragon hatchling had accepted her. And from that moment, their story began. The next morning, the colony stirred with the usual rhythm of life. Metal doors opened, workers marched toward the factories, and soldiers patrolled the walls. But far beyond the gates, in the hidden forest clearing, a secret was taking shape, one that would change everything. Elara woke early. She had barely slept. All night, she had dreamed of glowing eyes and soft growls, of scales that shimmered like black glass under the moonlight. She remembered the way the dragon hatchling had looked at her, not with rage, but with something else, something almost human. She knew she should tell someone. She knew her parents would be furious. But the thought of soldiers marching into the forest with rifles made her chest ache. They would not see what she saw. To them, the hatchling was only a threat. To her, it was something more. Elara waited until her parents were busy. She slipped a small piece of bread into her pocket, filled a tin cup with water, and crept out of the house. Her boots carried her back to the broken gate, past the warning signs, and into the forest where the air was cool and damp. The clearing was quiet when she arrived. For a moment, her heart sank. Maybe it had left. Maybe the hatchling was gone forever. Then the ground trembled. From the shadows, two glowing eyes blinked open. The dragon hatchling rose slowly, wings dragging against the dirt. Its body was weak, but its presence still filled the clearing with power. Elara froze, bread clutched in her hand. I came back, she whispered. See? I brought food. She held the bread out nervously. The hatchling's nose twitched, sniffing at the air. Its head lowered, sharp teeth glinting in the light. For a terrifying moment, Elara thought it might bite off her whole arm. But instead, it snapped the bread from her hand and swallowed it in one gulp. Elara giggled. You like it? The hatchling made a low rumble. Not quite a growl, not quite a purr, something in between. Its tail thumped against the ground. From that moment, a new ritual began. Each day, Elara returned with scraps of food. Fruit, bread, sometimes even small bits of cooked meat she stole from her plate. And each day, the hatchling grew stronger. Its torn wings began to mend. Its growls became louder. Its glowing eyes burned brighter. At first, it kept its distance. But slowly, step by step, it moved closer to her. By the end of the week, it allowed her to sit beside it without flinching. By the second week, it lowered its head so she could touch its scales. Elara's small hand brushed over its rough skin, and the hatchling closed its eyes, releasing a sound that almost felt like a sigh. You're not terrible, she whispered one evening. You're just lonely. I think you need a friend. The bond between them deepened with each passing day. But outside the forest, danger was growing. People began to notice. Workers saw Elara sneaking food from the kitchens. Her parents found her clothes covered in mud and leaves. Soldiers spotted her slipping through the broken gate. Rumors spread quickly in the colony. Some said she had found a secret hideout. Others whispered she was meeting something dangerous. One evening, her father confronted her. Where do you go, Elara? You vanish every day. You come home with scratches and dirt. Tell me the truth. Her lips trembled, but she shook her head. Nowhere, she whispered. He frowned. He wanted to believe her, But the soldiers were already talking about monsters in the woods. He warned her again. Stay inside the walls. The forest is no place for a child. Elara nodded, but her heart was stubborn. She could not abandon the hatchling now. One cloudy afternoon, she found the hatchling restless. Its wings beat against the ground, its eyes flashing brighter than ever. It growled at the sky, sniffing the air with sharp breaths. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. The hatchling turned its head sharply, staring into the distance as if it sensed something she could not. The forest grew quiet, the birds vanishing into the trees. Even the wind seemed to stop. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. The hatchling stomped its claw, then looked at her with a strange intensity. It stepped closer, pressing its snout against her shoulder, as if trying to warn her. "You're protecting me?" she whispered in wonder. The hatchling huffed, warm air brushing against her face. She smiled, though her heart pounded with nervous energy. Whatever it had sensed, it wasn't gone. That night, Elara's secret almost came to an end. A soldier named Karaz followed her into the woods. He had grown suspicious of her daily trips. When he saw her kneeling in the clearing, stroking the scales of a living dragon hatchling, his eyes widened in shock. He raised his rifle instantly. Elara screamed, "No, don't hurt him." She threw herself in front of the dragon, arms spread wide. The hatchling roared, its voice shaking the trees. Flames flickered in its throat. Karaz stumbled back, his finger twitching near the trigger. But then he stopped, for in that moment, he saw something impossible. The dragon lowering its head, letting the small girl cling to its snout like a friend. No blood, no attack, only trust. Karaz lowered his weapon slowly, eyes wide with disbelief. "By the stars," he whispered. "It listens to you." Elara's cheeks were wet with tears. "He's not bad," she cried. "He's mine." The soldier hesitated. His training told him to fire. His orders were clear: destroy all dangerous beasts. But his heart wavered. He turned without another word, leaving the girl and dragon in the clearing. The next day, whispers ran through the colony again. Soldiers gathered in hushed circles. Leaders argued behind closed doors. Some said the hatchling should be killed before it grew too strong. Others spoke of capturing it, of using its power. Elara listened in secret, her heart filled with fear. Back in the forest, the hatchling pressed close to her side, growling at unseen threats. It was no longer just a lonely creature. It was becoming her guardian. And deep in the sky, far beyond the colony, strange lights flickered. Alien ships searching for dragons. The bond between child and beast had been formed. But now it would be tested. The colony lived in uneasy peace. People worked, ate, and laughed. But whispers traveled through the streets like smoke. They spoke of the little girl who had been seen with a monster in the forest. Some believed it was only a child's game, nothing serious. Others feared it was true, that a dragon hatchling lived too close to their homes. Elara heard the whispers. She pretended not to care, but deep inside, she felt the weight of their fear. She knew what the colony would do if they found the hatchling. They would call it a threat. They would take it away from her. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, the ground shook with a strange rumble. It was not from the forest. Came from the sky. Elara ran outside with the other colonists, eyes raised toward the heavens. Far above, glowing lights drifted through the clouds, unnatural, cold, and sharp like blades of fire. They moved in formation, too steady to be meteors, too quiet to be storms. The older colonists grew pale. They knew the stories. Not all enemies came from the forest. Some came from beyond the stars. And these ships, they belonged to hunters. Elara's heart raced. She remembered the hatchling growling at the sky, restless and uneasy. It had sensed this before anyone else. She rushed back to the forest, slipping through shadows, ignoring the soldiers who shouted after her. In the clearing, the hatchling was waiting. Its scales were bristling, its wings stretched wide, its eyes glowing brighter than ever. It roared into the night sky, as if calling out to an old enemy. Alara stumbled into the grass, breathless. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew they were coming." The hatchling lowered its head and growled low, not at her, but at the heavens. Pawed the earth, sharp claws cutting the ground. Even as a child, Alara could see the truth. The dragon was not afraid. It was angry, but in the colony, fear was spreading faster than fire. Soldiers prepared their rifles. Leaders barked orders. The strange lights above grew larger, brighter, until their shape could be seen clearly. Long, metallic ships, each one marked with cruel symbols. Alien hunters. They had come for the dragon. The soldiers gathered near the broken gate, their faces hard. Karaz, the soldier who had once followed Alara, stood among them. He remembered the sight of the hatchling lowering its head for the girl. He remembered her small voice saying, "He's not bad." His finger shook on his rifle, but he stayed silent. Alara, hidden in the trees, hugged the hatchling's neck. She could feel its warmth, its power. "They can't take you," she whispered fiercely. "You're mine. You're not theirs." The dragon's chest rose and fell, fire flickering faintly in its throat. It pressed against her as if to say it understood. The alien ships pierced through the clouds, their engines humming like thunder. Lights swept across the forest, searching, hunting. The colony alarm screamed, filling the night with warning bells. Soldiers shouted for civilians to get inside. Mothers pulled children into their homes. Fear filled every corner of the colony. But Alara did not run. She stayed by the hatchling, her hands clinging to its rough scales. Her heart pounded, but her spirit refused to break. In the distance, a great shadow moved across the ground as the first ship hovered above the forest. A beam of light split the trees, searching, burning everything it touched. The hatchling roared back, the sound so loud it shook the earth. The soldiers at the gate gasped. Some lowered their weapons. Others tightened their grip. They had never seen anything like it. A child and a dragon, standing together against the night. Alara's eyes widened as the beam of light drew closer. The hunters were here. They were searching, and soon they would find them. The hatchling pressed its head against her once more, as if making a promise. Alara swallowed hard, whispering, "We'll face them together." The night sky burned with enemy lights. The forest trembled with danger. And for the first time, Alara understood. The dragon was not just her friend. It was her protector. But the hunters would never stop. The bond between them would be tested in fire. The colony was no longer calm. The sky was filled with the glow of alien ships, their sharp beams cutting across the forest like knives. Every heartbeat echoed with fear. Soldiers gathered near the gates, shouting orders, while families locked themselves inside their homes. The air carried the smell of metal and smoke, as if war had already begun. Alara sat hidden in the forest clearing, pressed close to the hatchling. Its glowing eyes burned brighter than ever, and its scales rattled with restless energy. It could sense the danger above, sense the ships circling like vultures. She stroked its neck with her small hand, whispering, "Don't be afraid. I won't leave you." But she knew fear was closing in. Back in the colony, the leaders had gathered. Their voices clashed with anger and worry. Some shouted that the dragon must be killed at once before the hunters arrived. Others argued it could be captured and used as a weapon. None spoke of protecting it. To them, it was nothing but a threat. Soldiers were ordered to find Alara. Her parents begged for her safety, but the commanders cared little for one child. They wanted the dragon. The alien hunters would not stop until they had it, and if the colony did not act first, many lives could be lost. Karaz, the soldier who had once seen Alara with the dragon, clenched his jaw. He remembered the way the hatchling had bowed its head for the girl, the way she had cried that it was not bad. His rifle felt heavy in his hands. Orders told him to kill. His heart told him to wait. Alara, unaware of the full danger in the colony, fed the hatchling the last piece of bread she had stolen from home. It snapped the food gently from her fingers, then gave a low rumble that shook the leaves. She laughed softly, though her eyes were full of worry. "You're not a monster," she whispered. "You're my friend." The ground quaked as the first alien ship descended lower. Its engines roared, sending waves of dust and wind through the forest. The hatchling hissed, wings stretching wide even though they were not yet strong enough for flight. Flames flickered at the edges of its mouth. Then came the sound of marching. Soldiers entered the forest in groups, rifles raised, armor gleaming under the alien light. Alara's heart froze when she saw them through the trees. She hugged the hatchling tightly, whispering, "Please, don't hurt them." The soldiers shouted when they spotted the beast. Weapons aimed. Fingers tightened on triggers. The hatchling roared, shaking the forest. The sound of fire crackled in its throat. And then it broke free. For days, Alara had kept it calm. She had hidden it, fed it, cared for it. But now, with weapons aimed at its heart and hunters above ready to strike, the hatchling exploded with fury. It leapt forward, wings smashing against the ground, claws tearing through the dirt. Its roar silenced the forest, echoing all the way back to the colony walls. The soldiers stumbled back, fear flashing in their eyes. None had expected so much power from something still so young. They fired their weapons, bolts of light flashing through the clearing. The hatchling twisted and dodged, its scales sparking as the shots grazed its body. Alara screamed, "Stop! Please, don't hurt him." Karaz lowered his weapon, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Hold fire!" But the others did not listen. The hatchling turned its head sharply, flames bursting from its jaws. A stream of fire lit the night, striking the ground near the soldiers. They scattered, some dropping their rifles, others retreating behind trees. The air filled with smoke and heat. Alara ran forward, standing in front of the dragon with her arms wide. Tears streamed down her face. "He's not your enemy," she shouted. "He's mine." The hatchling lowered its head, growling softly as if agreeing with her. It stood behind her like a shadow, its glowing eyes fixed on the soldiers. But above, the alien ships were watching. One beam of light scanned the clearing, locking onto the hatchling's form. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the forest, a language the humans did not understand, but one message was clear. They had found their target. The colony's soldiers froze, torn between fear of the hatchling and fear of the hunters. Karaz cursed under his breath, lowering his rifle. He looked at the girl, at the beast standing guard behind her, and felt a decision burning inside him. The hatchling let out another roar, but this one was different. It was not just rage. It was a warning, a promise. Fire glowed in its throat, ready to fight, ready to protect. And Alara whispered, trembling but fearless, "I trust you." The forest shook as the alien ships prepared to strike. Soldiers stood divided, unsure whether to fight the dragon or fight the greater threat above. And in the middle of it all, a little girl and a terrible hatchling stood together, bound by something no one else could understand. The bond was no longer secret. The world had seen it, and now it would be tested in war. The night sky was burning. Alien ships hung above the colony like dark predators, their beams sweeping across the forest as they searched for their prize. The sound of their engines rolled like thunder, shaking the walls and rattling the hearts of everyone inside. Soldiers scrambled into position along the gates, weapons loaded, eyes fixed on the heavens. Families huddled in their homes, praying the attack would pass them by. But deep inside, everyone knew the hunters had come for one thing, the dragon. Alara stood in the clearing with the hatchling pressed against her side. Its wings spread wide, glowing faintly in the alien light. Fire flickered in its throat, bright enough to paint her face in orange and gold. She looked up at the sky, at the ships lowering closer with every second, and whispered, "They won't take you. Not while I'm here." The hatchling growled, low and dangerous. It understood. Then the first strike came. A blinding beam of energy lanced down from the nearest ship, tearing through the forest. Trees split apart, the ground shook, and flames erupted where the blast struck. Alara screamed as the heat rushed toward her. The hatchling leapt forward, curling its body around her like a shield. Fire scorched its scales, but it did not move away. Its only thought was to protect the girl. Soldiers arrived in the clearing at that moment. Some opened fire at the sky, their weapons flashing. Others still pointed their rifles at the hatchling, torn between old orders and the new threat raining down from above. Karas shouted over the chaos. "Forget the beast! Aim at the sky!" His words were nearly lost in the thunder of engines and screams of fear. The alien hunters descended. Dark shapes dropped from the ships, tall figures in armor that glowed with unnatural light. Their weapons pulsed with deadly energy, slicing through trees and stone as easily as paper. They marched in silence, their eyes fixed on the dragon. The hatchling roared, a sound so loud the ground seemed to tremble beneath Alara's feet. Fire erupted from its jaws, sweeping across the hunters. Some staggered back, their armor blackened, but others stood firm, raising their weapons to strike again. The hatchling lunged forward, claws flashing, and crushed one beneath its weight. Alara's heart raced. This was no helpless creature anymore. This was fury given form. But it was still small, still young. The hunters pressed in from every side, their weapons striking faster and harder. The hatchling faltered, wounded, but refused to fall. It fought not for itself, but for the little girl who clung to its side, crying out, "Don't stop! You're stronger than them." The colony soldiers finally joined the fight. Bolts of energy lit the clearing as humans and aliens clashed. Karas led the charge, firing again and again into the hunters, shouting for his men to hold the line. He stole a glance at the dragon, at the child who stood beside it with fearless eyes, and he realized the truth. This was no monster. This was an ally. The battle raged on. Flames and gunfire tore through the night. The forest became a battlefield, filled with smoke and broken trees. Every second felt like the end, yet Alara refused to leave. She stood in the heart of the storm, her small hands gripping the hatchling scales, her voice a constant cry of courage. "I'm here. I won't leave you." The hatchling seemed to draw strength from her words. Its wings, though still young, spread wider than ever. With a roar that shook the stars, it leapt into the air. For the first time, it truly flew. Fire poured from its mouth in a blazing storm, cutting through the hunters and forcing them to scatter. The alien ship above reeled as the hatchling's fire struck its hull. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the vessel lurched to the side. The hunters on the ground hesitated, their formation breaking. The humans pressed forward, shouting in triumph. Alara's eyes shone with wonder. Her friend was not only surviving, he was winning. But the hunters were not finished. A second ship lowered, larger than the first, its weapons glowing with deadly energy. A beam of light shot down, striking the hatchling in midair. It screamed, wings burning, and fell back into the clearing with a crash that shook the earth. Alara ran to it at once, tears streaming down her face. "No, don't give up. Please, you can't give up." The hatchling's eyes flickered weakly. Smoke rose from its wings. For a moment, it seemed the fight was over. The hunters closed in, their shadows falling across the girl and the dragon. And then Alara did something no one expected. She stood in front of the hatchling, her tiny arms spread wide, her voice rising above the battle. "You'll have to go through me first," she shouted at the alien hunters. "He's not a monster, he's my friend, and I won't let you take him." The hunters paused. Even in their alien minds, something in her defiance gave them hesitation. Behind her, the hatchling's eyes burned brighter once more. It lifted its head, fire glowing in its throat. Alara's courage had awakened its strength. With a roar that shattered the night, it unleashed a wave of fire greater than any before. The flames struck the hunters, tearing through their ranks, and rose high enough to scorch the belly of the ship above. The vessel groaned, its engines failing. Smoke poured from its hull as it pulled back into the sky. The remaining hunters, burned and broken, fled into the shadows. The battle was over. Silence fell across the clearing. The soldiers stared in awe, weapons lowered. The colony had survived, not because of their rifles, but because of the creature they had once called a threat. Elara knelt beside the hatchling, her hands stroking its scorched scales. It breathed heavily, exhausted but alive. She pressed her forehead against its snout and whispered through her tears, "You did it. You saved us." The soldiers looked at one another, uncertain what to think. Some still saw danger in the dragon's glowing eyes. But others, including Kara's, saw something else: loyalty, courage, and the strange, unbreakable bond between a child and a beast. Above, the alien ships pulled back into the night sky, retreating for now. But everyone knew they would return. The question was no longer whether the dragon was a threat. The question was what it would become. And as the colony stared at the girl and her hatchling protector, one thought echoed in every mind. If this was what a young dragon could do, what would happen when it grew to its full size? The battlefield was quiet at last. Smoke drifted through the broken trees, and the scorched earth still glowed where fire had burned deepest. The alien ships were gone, their lights fading into the night sky like dying stars. The people of the colony stepped cautiously into the clearing, their eyes wide as they took in the sight before them. A little girl sat beside a dragon hatchling, her small hand resting gently on its nose. The creature's scales were cracked and blackened from the fight, its wings torn, its chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. But it was alive. It had fought for them, not against them. And it had done so because of her. No one spoke at first. They only stared, torn between fear and awe. For years, dragons had been nothing but a story of destruction, a warning whispered to frightened children. Yet here was one lying quietly under the hand of a 6-year-old girl, its glowing eyes softened not with rage but with trust. Elara leaned closer, whispering softly, "You're safe now. They can't hurt you. I told you we're together." The hatchling rumbled in reply, a low, tired sound, but there was comfort in it. Kara stepped forward, his rifle lowered. He looked at the girl, then at the dragon. His voice was steady but uncertain. "I don't understand. Why does it protect you?" Elara looked up at him, her cheeks still wet with tears, her expression innocent and sure. "Because I called him cute," she said simply. "And because he's not bad. He just needed a friend." The soldier had no answer. Around him, others shifted uncomfortably. Some muttered that the beast should still be destroyed before it grew too strong. Others, shaken by the memory of the battle, wondered aloud if the colony would even be standing without its fire. The colony leaders arrived, grim-faced and silent. They walked among the scorched earth, saw the alien bodies, and looked up at the sky where the ships had fled. Their eyes narrowed as they turned back to the dragon. To them, the truth was unavoidable. The hatchling was powerful, too powerful to be ignored. One leader finally spoke. "This thing is a weapon. If we control it, no hunter, no enemy, will ever dare approach us again." Elara clutched the hatchling tighter, shaking her head fiercely. "He's not a weapon. He's my friend." Her small voice echoed across the clearing. The soldiers shifted uneasily. The leaders frowned. For a moment, no one dared speak again. The hatchling stirred, lifting its head. It looked at the girl with glowing eyes full of strange, unspoken meaning. Then it turned its gaze on the colony, the soldiers, the leaders, the people. Its growl was low but clear, and though it was wounded, its strength still pulsed like fire in its chest. The message was simple: harm the girl, and you face me. The crowd stepped back. Even the bravest soldiers lowered their weapons. They had seen enough to know the hatchling's promise was no empty threat. That night, the colony returned to uneasy silence. Families whispered of the dragon that had saved them. Children spoke in awe of the little girl who stood beside it without fear. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a danger waiting to grow. But no one could deny what they had seen. Elara sat with the hatchling under the broken trees until dawn. When the first light touched the forest, she leaned close and whispered the same word that had begun it all. "Cute." The dragon's eyes closed, and for the first time since she had found it, it seemed at peace. But far above the planet, beyond the reach of the colony's walls, the alien hunters were not finished. Their ships circled in the dark, watching, waiting. They had lost this battle, but they would return. For in their eyes, a dragon was never just a creature. It was power, and power was worth any price. The colony did not yet understand what had begun. The leaders still argued, the soldiers still doubted, and the people still whispered. But Alara knew. She could feel it in her heart every time she touched the hatchling scales. This was only the beginning. One day, the hatchling that fit beneath her arms would grow into wings large enough to darken the sky. One day, the creature that others called a monster would be the protector of worlds. And one day, the galaxy would remember that it all began with a little girl who looked at the most terrifying dragon and saw something no one else dared to see. Not a weapon, not a monster, but a friend.